Sarah Mitchell had always believed that hard work would eventually pay off. It was a philosophy her grandmother had instilled in her during countless summer afternoons spent in the small garden behind their modest home in Naperville. Plant your seeds with care, water them with dedication, and eventually you'll harvest what you've sown. Her grandmother used to say, her weathered hands gentle on Sarah's shoulders as they tended to tomatoes and sunflowers together. For 3 years, Sarah had poured her heart and soul into Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, a mid-sized advertising agency in downtown Chicago. The company occupied 3 floors of a sleek glass building on Michigan Avenue, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the Chicago River and the bustling financial district beyond. Every morning, she arrived at the building at 7:30 sharp, an hour before anyone else, clutching her thermos of coffee and ready to tackle whatever challenges awaited her. The early morning ritual had become sacred to Sarah. She would badge into the empty office, flip on the lights in the reception area, and make her way to her desk in the open-plan workspace. The silence of the empty office was peaceful, almost meditative, broken only by the gentle hum of computers starting up and the distant sound of early commuters on the street below. It was during these quiet morning hours that Sarah felt most productive, most hopeful about her future with the company. The November wind whipped through the city streets, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors and the promise of an early winter. Sarah pulled her wool coat tighter as she hurried through the revolving doors, her heels clicking against the marble floor of the lobby. She had become known as the person who could handle anything, the one who stayed late to perfect presentations, who never missed a deadline, and who somehow managed to keep track of every detail that others overlooked. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue sharing these incredible tales of resilience and triumph. Her colleagues often joked that Sarah lived and breathed the company, and in many ways they were right. She had sacrificed weekends, holidays, and social events, all in the hope that her dedication would be recognized and rewarded. Her small apartment in Lincoln Park reflected this commitment, with stacks of marketing reports on her dining table and her laptop perpetually open on the kitchen counter. The one-bedroom unit had become more of an extension of her office than a home, with client files organized in neat piles on every available surface. The walls of her apartment were decorated with framed certificates from marketing courses she had taken in her spare time, always seeking to improve her skills and knowledge. She had spent thousands of her own dollars on professional development, attending weekend seminars on digital marketing strategies, social media analytics, and client relationship management. Her bookshelf was filled with business books, their pages marked with colorful sticky notes and highlighted passages that she would reference during late-night planning sessions. Sarah's social life had gradually diminished as her work commitments expanded. Friends from college had stopped inviting her to weekend gatherings after months of last-minute cancellations due to client emergencies. Her sister Emily, who lived in Milwaukee, would call every Sunday evening, expressing concern about Sarah's work-life balance. "You're missing out on your 20s," Emily would say during their weekly conversations. "There's more to life than climbing the corporate ladder." But Sarah remained convinced that her sacrifices would eventually lead to recognition and advancement. But despite her unwavering loyalty and exceptional performance, Sarah remained in the same position she had started in 3 years ago, with the same modest salary and the same vague promises of future advancement. Her annual reviews were consistently excellent, with Marcus praising her attention to detail, her client management skills, and her ability to handle multiple projects simultaneously. Yet somehow, these glowing evaluations never translated into concrete rewards or career progression. Sarah's starting salary of $42,000 had received only minimal cost of living adjustments over the years, barely keeping pace with Chicago's rising rents and living expenses. Meanwhile, she watched as newer employees, particularly those with MBA degrees or family connections, seemed to advance more quickly through the company hierarchy. The disparity was particularly frustrating because Sarah often found herself training these new hires, sharing the institutional knowledge and client insights she had accumulated through years of dedicated service. Her boss, Marcus Thornfield, was a charismatic 42-year-old who had inherited the company from his father. Marcus Sr. had built Pinnacle Marketing from the ground up in the 1980s, starting with a small office in the Loop and gradually expanding to become one of Chicago's respected mid-tier marketing agencies. When Marcus Jr. took over 5 years ago, he had grand plans for modernization and growth, speaking passionately about digital transformation and innovative client solutions during company meetings. He had a talent for making grand gestures and inspiring speeches about teamwork and company culture, but when it came to actual recognition and compensation, his memory seemed to conveniently fade. Marcus was the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. Tall, with perfectly styled salt and pepper hair and expensive suits that fit him like they were tailored by angels, he had a way of making everyone feel like they were part of something important. He drove a Tesla Model S, lived in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and seemed to effortlessly glide through life while others, like Sarah, worked tirelessly to make his vision a reality. The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered to Sarah's desk by Marcus himself. The heavy cream-colored cardstock felt luxurious between her fingers as she read the elegant script. Marcus Thornfield and Isabella Romano request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration. The venue was the prestigious Drake Hotel, and the dress code was listed as cocktail attire. A small note in Marcus's handwriting at the bottom read, "Looking forward to celebrating with the whole Pinnacle family." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she held the invitation. It was the first time in her 3 years at the company that she had been invited to such a personal event in Marcus's life. She wondered if this meant she was finally being recognized as more than just another employee, if perhaps she was being welcomed into the inner circle of trusted colleagues and friends. The invitation felt like validation, a sign that her years of dedication had not gone unnoticed. She immediately called Emily to share the news. "He invited me to his wedding," Sarah said excitedly into the phone during her lunch break. "This has to mean something, right? Maybe he's finally going to promote me to account manager." Emily was supportive but cautious, reminding Sarah not to read too much into a simple wedding invitation. "Just enjoy the party," Emily advised. "Don't put too much pressure on it being more than it is." Sarah spent weeks preparing for the event, carefully budgeting for a new dress from a department store downtown. She had saved for months to afford something appropriate for such an upscale venue, eventually settling on a navy blue cocktail dress that wasn't designer but was elegant and made her feel confident. She also invested in new shoes, a small clutch purse, and even splurged on a professional hair and makeup consultation to ensure she looked her absolute best. She practiced conversations in her mirror, imagining herself networking with Marcus's friends and family, perhaps even landing a new client or opportunity through casual conversation. She researched the other attendees on LinkedIn, preparing talking points about industry trends and potential business opportunities. Sarah even practiced her elevator pitch, refining her description of her role at Pinnacle and her contributions to the company's success. The anticipation built throughout the weeks leading up to the wedding. Sarah found herself working even harder than usual, hoping to complete several major projects before the event so she could discuss her recent successes with Marcus and his associates. She stayed late every night, perfecting client presentations and ensuring that all her accounts were running smoothly. In her mind, the wedding represented an opportunity to showcase herself as a valuable team member worthy of advancement. The night of the wedding, Sarah took extra care with her appearance. She styled her auburn hair in an elegant updo, applied makeup with more precision than usual, and slipped into her new dress and modest heels. As she looked at herself in the full-length mirror of her bedroom, she felt ready to represent herself and the company with pride. The Drake Hotel sparkled like a jewel against the Chicago skyline, its historic facade illuminated by warm golden lights. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with white roses, twinkling fairy lights, and crystal chandeliers casting a magical glow over the assembled guests. The November evening had brought a light snowfall, and through the tall windows, the city looked like something from a romantic movie. Sarah arrived fashionably on time, checking her coat and smoothing her dress before entering the reception area. She recognized several colleagues scattered throughout the crowd, all dressed in their finest attire. The atmosphere was festive, with a jazz quartet playing softly in the corner and servers circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. She felt slightly out of place among the obvious wealth and sophistication of the other guests, but she reminded herself that she belonged here. She had earned her place through hard work and dedication. As she accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, she spotted Marcus across the room, resplendent in his custom tuxedo, his arm around his beautiful bride Isabella, who looked stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. For the first hour, Sarah mingled politely with other guests, engaging in small talk about the beautiful venue and the lovely ceremony. She met Isabella's family, successful restaurateurs from New York who owned a chain of upscale Italian restaurants throughout the Northeast. They were warm and welcoming, asking thoughtful questions about her work and expressing genuine interest in the marketing industry. Sarah also encountered some of Marcus's college friends who now worked in finance and tech, successful professionals who treated her as an equal in their conversations about business and career development. The atmosphere was sophisticated yet warm, with guests sharing stories and laughter as they moved between the cocktail hour and dinner service. Sarah began to feel more comfortable, thinking that perhaps she had been worrying for nothing. These people seemed genuinely nice, and she was holding her own in conversations about everything from digital marketing trends to Chicago's restaurant scene. She even exchanged business cards with a few potential networking contacts who expressed interest in Pinnacle services. During the cocktail hour, Sarah had a particularly engaging conversation with Isabella's brother Marco, who was launching his own boutique hotel in downtown Chicago and was interested in discussing marketing strategies for the hospitality industry. Their conversation was interrupted several times by other guests who wanted to congratulate the family, but Marco made a point of asking for Sarah's business card and mentioning that he would love to continue their discussion after the honeymoon. Everyone seemed genuinely nice, and Sarah began to relax, thinking that perhaps this evening would be the turning point in her relationship with her boss. She felt professionally confident and socially comfortable, exactly the way she had hoped to feel when she first received the invitation weeks ago. The dinner portion of the evening was elegant and delicious, with multiple courses served on fine china and paired with expensive wines. The menu featured seasonal ingredients prepared by the Drake Hotel's award-winning culinary team, including butternut squash soup with truffle oil, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and a decadent chocolate dessert that drew appreciative murmurs from guests throughout the ballroom. Sarah found herself seated at a table with other Pinnacle marketing employees, including Janet from accounting, Robert from the creative department, and Lisa, a newer hire in social media management. The conversation flowed easily, covering everything from office gossip to weekend plans to shared experiences working with difficult clients. The wine was excellent, and Sarah allowed herself to enjoy 2 glasses throughout the evening, feeling more relaxed and social than she had in months. Janet, who had been with the company for 5 years, shared stories about the early days under Marcus Sr.'s leadership, describing a more formal but perhaps more equitable workplace culture. Robert entertained the table with amusing anecdotes about challenging creative briefs and demanding clients, while Lisa asked thoughtful questions about career development and advancement opportunities within the company. The atmosphere at their table was warm and collegial, and Sarah felt comfortable and included in a way that reminded her why she had initially been so excited to work at Pinnacle. These were good people, dedicated professionals who cared about their work and supported each other through the challenges of agency life. It was during the speeches that everything changed. The traditional wedding program had proceeded beautifully, with heartfelt words from both fathers about love, commitment, and the joy of watching their children find happiness. Isabella's maid of honor, her sister Francesca, had delivered a touching speech about growing up together and the excitement of gaining Marcus as a brother-in-law. The best man, Marcus's college roommate David, had shared amusing but respectful stories about their friendship and Marcus's journey to finding true love. After the traditional toasts from the fathers of the bride and groom, and heartfelt words from the maid of honor and best man, Marcus stood up to address his guests. The ballroom quieted as servers paused in their work and conversations ceased throughout the room. He looked handsome and confident as he tapped his champagne flute with a silver spoon, calling for attention with the natural charisma that had made him successful in business. The lighting in the ballroom cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, and the moment felt significant, ceremonial. Sarah felt a flutter of anticipation, wondering if he might acknowledge her contributions to the company's success, perhaps even announce some exciting business news or company developments. She had seen him give inspiring speeches at company meetings, and she expected this address to be equally uplifting and inclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this incredible moment with Isabella and me, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. As I look around this room, I see the faces of everyone who has made my life and my business what it is today. Sarah felt a flutter of anticipation, wondering if he might acknowledge her contributions to the company's success. I want to thank my incredible team at Pinnacle Marketing, Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. We've built something amazing together, and I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. Sarah smiled, feeling proud to be part of this acknowledgement. But then Marcus's tone shifted slightly, becoming more casual, almost joking. You know, people always ask me how I manage to keep track of everything at the company, how I remember every detail and never miss a deadline. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. The crowd leaned in, anticipating some wisdom about leadership or time management. Marcus chuckled and looked directly at Sarah's table. The truth is, I don't have to remember anything because I have what I like to call the email girl. She keeps track of everything for me, sends me reminders about every little thing, and basically makes sure I never have to think about the small stuff. Sarah felt her cheeks burn as several guests turned to look at her, some with amused smiles, others with expressions of second-hand embarrassment. The term email girl echoed in her ears like a slap, reducing 3 years of dedicated work, late nights, client relationship building, and professional achievements to nothing more than administrative assistance. She felt exposed and humiliated, sitting there in her carefully chosen dress, having spent weeks preparing for this moment, only to be reduced to a punchline in front of everyone who mattered in their professional world. The silence that followed felt eternal, though it probably lasted only seconds. Sarah was acutely aware of every face that turned toward her, every whisper that might be starting, every assumption that was being formed about her role and value in the company. Janet reached over instinctively, her hand finding Sarah's under the table, offering silent support and solidarity. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his earlier joviality replaced by obvious discomfort at witnessing his colleague's public humiliation. Marcus wasn't done. Seriously, this woman sends me more emails in a day than I get from everyone else combined. If I need to know what I had for lunch last Tuesday, I just check with the email girl. She's like my personal memory bank, except instead of storing it in my head, it's all stored in her inbox. The crowd laughed, thinking it was all in good fun, but Sarah felt each word like a physical blow. She had been publicly humiliated in front of clients, colleagues, and complete strangers, her professional identity reduced to a punchline in her boss's wedding speech. The laughter felt like it was coming from very far away, distorted and cruel, as Sarah struggled to maintain her composure while her professional reputation was being dismantled in real time. Janet reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand under the table, offering silent support, but Sarah barely registered the gesture. She was trapped in a nightmare of public embarrassment, unable to leave without drawing more attention to herself, forced to sit there with a fake smile plastered on her face, while the man she had worked so hard for mocked her dedication in front of everyone who mattered in their professional world. When Marcus finished his speech to applause and raised glasses, Sarah excused herself to the restroom, her hands shaking as she walked through the crowd. She moved carefully, maintaining her composure despite feeling like she might collapse at any moment. The walk across the ballroom felt like a gauntlet, with every step bringing her past more faces, more potential witnesses to her humiliation. In the opulent marble bathroom of the Drake Hotel, Sarah stared at herself in the mirror, her carefully applied makeup now smudged with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. The bathroom was mercifully empty, allowing her to finally drop the mask of professional composure she had been desperately maintaining. Her reflection looked back at her, a woman who had dressed carefully for an event she thought would celebrate her professional community, only to discover she was seen as nothing more than a convenient tool. She thought about all the overtime hours, All the weekends spent working while her friends were out enjoying their lives. All the time she had gone above and beyond for a boss who apparently saw her as nothing more than a human reminder system. The sacrifices she had made, the social opportunities she had missed, the relationships she had neglected, all for a career that had just been publicly diminished to its most basic and demeaning elements. Sarah remembered specific instances of her dedication. The time she had worked through the flu to meet a client deadline, the weekend she had spent restructuring the Peterson account proposal that ended up landing them their biggest contract of the year, the countless evenings she had stayed late to perfect presentations that Marcus would deliver to clients and take credit for. All of it reduced to the email girl in front of a room full of industry professionals. The humiliation burned in her chest, but beneath it, something else was growing: anger. Not just at Marcus, but at herself for accepting less than she deserved for so long, for allowing her contributions to be minimized and overlooked, for believing that patient dedication would automatically lead to recognition and advancement. As she composed herself and prepared to return to the reception, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't going to pretend that being called the email girl in front of a room full of people was acceptable workplace behavior, even at a wedding. But she also wasn't going to make a scene at Marcus's wedding reception. She had too much class for that, and she knew that any outburst would only confirm whatever dismissive opinion he already had of her. No, she would handle this professionally, the way she handled everything else in her life. Sarah returned to the reception with renewed composure, though the evening had lost all its magic for her. She made polite conversation for another hour, accepted congratulations from colleagues who tried to downplay what had happened, and even managed to smile and nod when Marcus and Isabella made their rounds to thank guests for attending. When Marcus approached her table, still glowing from the celebration and perhaps a bit too much champagne, he seemed completely oblivious to how his words had affected her. "Sarah, thanks so much for coming tonight. Isabella and I are so glad you could make it. I hope you enjoyed my little speech." Sarah looked up at him, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh, I found it very enlightening, Marcus. Very revealing." He missed the subtle edge in her voice entirely, slapping Robert on the back and moving on to the next table of well-wishers. Sarah left the reception at a reasonable time, thanking the hosts politely and collecting her coat from the check. As she stepped out into the cold November night, the snow was falling more heavily now, covering the city in a pristine white blanket. But Sarah barely noticed the beauty of the winter scene. Her mind was already working, planning her next moves. The weekend gave her time to think, to process what had happened, and to decide how she wanted to respond. She could quit, of course. She could find another job at a company that would value her contributions and treat her with respect. But that felt like running away, like letting Marcus win without ever understanding the true cost of his casual cruelty. On Monday morning, Sarah arrived at the office early as usual, but this time she had a different purpose. She had spent the weekend reviewing her employee contract, a document she had signed 3 years ago and never looked at since. Hidden in the fine print among clauses about vacation time and benefits, she had found something interesting. Section 12.4 addressed workplace harassment and public humiliation. It defined such behavior as any action by management that could reasonably be considered demeaning or embarrassing to an employee in a public or semi-public setting, particularly in front of clients, colleagues, or business associates. The clause specified that such incidents, when documented and reported, could result in significant financial penalties for the company. But more importantly, Sarah had discovered something else in her contract review. A clause about intellectual property and client relationships that she had never paid attention to before. According to Section 8.7, any employee who had been primarily responsible for maintaining client relationships and communications for a period of more than 2 years would be entitled to a significant portion of any revenue generated from those relationships in the event of their departure, provided they could demonstrate their integral role in maintaining those accounts. Sarah had been the primary point of contact for over 60% of Pinnacle Marketing's clients for the past 3 years. She had their phone numbers memorized, knew their preferences, their budgets, their families' names. She had nurtured these relationships through countless emails, phone calls, and meetings. In many ways, she was more valuable to the company than anyone, including Marcus, had ever realized. Marcus was running late on Monday morning, as usual, rushing through the office with his coffee and his phone pressed to his ear. He barely acknowledged Sarah as he passed her desk, which was nothing new. But today, Sarah was ready for him. At 10 o'clock, she knocked on his office door. "Marcus, do you have a few minutes to discuss something important?" He looked up from his computer, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Sure, Sarah, but make it quick. I have a call with the Peterson account in 15 minutes. Sarah sat down across from his desk, a folder in her hands. "Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. The Peterson account and several others." She opened the folder and pulled out a printed copy of her employment contract. "I've been reviewing the terms of my employment agreement, particularly the sections regarding workplace conduct and intellectual property rights." Marcus looked confused. "Okay, is there some kind of problem with your benefits or something?" Sarah kept her voice steady and professional. "At your wedding reception Saturday night, you referred to me publicly as the email girl in front of clients, colleagues, and business associates. You described my professional contributions in terms that were demeaning and dismissive." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Oh, come on, Sarah. That was just a joke. Everyone knew I was kidding around." According to Section 12.4 of my employment contract, Sarah continued, "Any public humiliation or demeaning behavior by management toward an employee, particularly in the presence of clients or business associates, constitutes workplace harassment and is grounds for significant financial penalties." For the first time since she had known him, Marcus looked genuinely concerned. "Sarah, I think you're overreacting. It was my wedding. Everyone was having a good time." Sarah pulled out another document. "I've also been reviewing Section 8.7, which addresses intellectual property and client relationship ownership. Did you know that an employee who has been primarily responsible for maintaining client relationships for more than 2 years is entitled to a significant portion of revenue from those accounts if they leave the company?" Marcus's face had gone pale. "What are you getting at here, Sarah?" Sarah spread out several more documents on his desk. Client contact lists, communication logs, contract renewal records, all meticulously organized and documented. "I am the primary point of contact for 68% of our active client accounts. I have their personal phone numbers. I know their project histories, their budget constraints, their decision-making processes. Many of them have specifically requested to work with me on their accounts." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "When clients call the main office number, they ask for me by name. When they have concerns or new projects, they email me directly. When Peterson Industries renewed their contract last month, they specifically stated in writing that their decision was based on the exceptional service they received from their account coordinator." Marcus was staring at the documents, beginning to understand the implications. "Sarah, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that calling me the email girl was not only personally humiliating and professionally inappropriate, it was also a fundamental misunderstanding of my actual value to this company." Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "I'm not just someone who sends you reminders and keeps track of details. I am the reason this company has maintained long-term relationships with the majority of its revenue-generating clients." She pulled out one final document, a resignation letter. "According to my contract, if I resign due to workplace harassment, I am entitled to certain considerations regarding the client relationships I've developed. Several of our biggest clients have already expressed interest in continuing to work with me personally, regardless of my employment status here." Marcus's hand was shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. "Sarah, I think we can work this out. Maybe I was a little inappropriate at the wedding, but that's no reason to." "A little inappropriate?" Sarah interrupted, her professional composure cracking slightly. "Marcus, you reduced 3 years of dedicated work, countless overtime hours, and professional expertise to a punchline at your wedding. In front of clients who trust me, colleagues who respect me, and strangers who now think of me as nothing more than your personal assistant." She stood up, gathering her documents. "I'm not resigning today, Marcus, but I am putting you on notice that your behavior was unacceptable, legally problematic, and potentially very expensive for this company." Marcus was scrambling now, realizing that his casual cruelty could have serious consequences. "Sarah, please sit down. Let's talk about this rationally. What would it take to resolve this situation?" Sarah paused at the door of his office. "What would it take? How about the respect and recognition I should have received years ago? How about a public apology for your behavior at the wedding? How about a promotion to the position I've been performing without compensation for the past 2 years? And how about a salary that reflects my actual contribution to this company's success?" Over the next few days, word of Sarah's confrontation with Marcus spread through the office, though she never discussed the details with anyone. She continued to perform her duties with the same professionalism she had always shown, but there was a new confidence in her manner, a sense that she finally understood her own worth. Marcus, meanwhile, was clearly struggling with the situation. He consulted with the company's legal team, reviewed Sarah's contract claims, and gradually came to understand just how precarious his position had become. The woman he had dismissed as the email girl was, in fact, the single most important employee in his company when it came to client relationships and retention. On Thursday morning, Marcus called Sarah into his office again. This time, his demeanor was completely different. Gone was the casual arrogance and dismissive attitude. He looked like a man who had spent several sleepless nights contemplating the potential collapse of his business. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Not just for what happened at the wedding, but for years of failing to recognize your contributions to this company." Sarah sat quietly, waiting for him to continue. "I've had our accountants run the numbers," Marcus continued. "The clients you manage directly generate 72% of our annual revenue. Your retention rate is 96%, compared to an industry average of 68%. You haven't just been managing client relationships. You've been the reason this company has grown consistently for the past 3 years." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I'm prepared to offer you a promotion to Director of Client Relations, effective immediately, with a salary increase of 45% and a bonus structure tied to client retention and new business development." Sarah opened the folder and reviewed the offer. It was everything she had hoped for and more. But more than the money, it was the recognition she had craved for so long. "There's also this," Marcus said, sliding another document across the desk. It was a formal apology letter, addressed to all employees, acknowledging his inappropriate behavior at the wedding and his failure to properly recognize Sarah's contributions to the company. "I'll be sending this to everyone who was at the wedding," Marcus explained, "clients included. I want them to know that my comments were inappropriate and in no way reflective of your actual role or value to this organization." Sarah read the letter carefully. It was thorough, sincere, and would effectively repair any professional damage his comments might have caused. But she wasn't done yet. "I appreciate this, Marcus, and I accept your apology," she said. "But there's one more thing I need from you." Marcus looked nervous. "What's that?" "I want you to understand why this was so damaging," Sarah said. "It wasn't just about hurt feelings or wounded pride. When you reduce someone's professional identity to a joke, when you dismiss their contributions as trivial, you're not just hurting that person. You're creating a culture where hard work isn't valued, where dedication isn't recognized, and where people feel like they have to fight just to be seen as human." She continued, "I've worked with you for 3 years, Marcus. I've seen you inspire people with your vision and your passion for this business. But I've also seen you take credit for other people's work, dismiss contributions that didn't come from your inner circle, and treat employees like interchangeable parts rather than individuals with skills and value." Marcus listened quietly, perhaps hearing this kind of feedback for the first time in his professional life. "If you want to build a company that truly succeeds," Sarah concluded, "you need to recognize that your employees aren't just resources to be managed. They're partners in your success, and they deserve to be treated with the same respect you'd want for yourself." The changes at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions didn't happen overnight, but they were significant and lasting. Sarah's promotion was announced company-wide, along with Marcus's public apology for his behavior. Several other employees received overdue promotions and salary adjustments as Marcus began to take a more honest look at the contributions of his entire team. Sarah's new role allowed her to implement client relationship strategies she had been developing for years, resulting in even higher retention rates and significant new business growth. The Peterson account, which Marcus had mentioned in his ill-fated wedding speech, renewed their contract early and increased their annual spending by 30%, specifically citing their confidence in Sarah's continued involvement. The wedding incident, which had initially seemed like a career-ending humiliation, became the catalyst for Sarah's professional breakthrough. She learned that sometimes the most difficult moments in our lives are actually opportunities in disguise, chances to stand up for ourselves and demand the respect we deserve. 6 months later, Sarah received an invitation to another wedding, this time from Janet in accounting, who had been at Marcus's reception and witnessed the entire situation unfold. At this celebration, Sarah was introduced not as the email girl, but as the director of client relations at one of Chicago's fastest-growing marketing agencies. As she mingled with other guests, sharing stories of professional success and personal growth, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. The navy blue dress she had worn to Marcus's wedding hung in her closet as a reminder of that difficult night, but she had since invested in a whole new wardrobe befitting her new position and salary. More importantly, she had learned the value of standing up for herself, of understanding her own worth, and of refusing to accept treatment that diminished her dignity or her contributions. The 3 years of hard work had finally paid off, not through patient waiting for recognition, but through the courage to demand what she had earned. Marcus, for his part, had learned an expensive but valuable lesson about leadership, respect, and the true cost of casual cruelty. The company thrived under a new culture of recognition and mutual respect, and while he and Sarah would never be close friends, they developed a professional relationship based on acknowledgement of each other's contributions and value. The story of the email girl became something of a legend in the Chicago marketing community, not as a tale of humiliation, but as an example of how one person's courage to stand up for themselves could transform not just their own career, but an entire company's culture. Sarah's experience reminded everyone who heard it that our worth isn't determined by how others see us, but by how we see ourselves and how we choose to respond when that worth is challenged.